What up? Welcome back. It is Bones. And in this one, let's take a look at the newest upcoming figures from McFarlane. We have actually seen some images now, so we can get a better idea of what we will actually be receiving. Now, there's basically only two I really want to talk about, and that is the images of classic Wonder Woman and also the newest images of Lobo with the Space Hog. Now let's start off with Wonder Woman. And if anybody knows me or has been following me for a while, they know that a while back I would actually just like laugh at people that kept like clamoring about classic Wonder Woman. Actually, Wonder Woman has gotten a lot of figures from McFarlane. There's so many that I probably won't even remember them all, but you have the Death Metal one, the Todd McFarlane design, the Endless Winter, the Last Night on Earth, and actually also multiple versions of each one of these Wonder Woman releases. But of course, everybody still wanted a just standard regular comic version of Wonder Woman. Now, actually, the closest thing that we have gotten to that was actually the Gal Gadot Wonder Woman from Justice League, more of a classic costume, and we've actually received various versions of this one. You even have that golden armor one, which is a pretty slept on figure. It's actually a really nice figure. Now, he also did do a redo of this one because after the sausage leg catastrophe of the first release, he did release the Shazam Fury of the Gods version with a little bit thicker thighs. And although a lot of people would still say that she is kind of tall, especially representing Gal Gadot, she does fit in well with your figures. I basically use mine in my live action. So this, kind of kit bash version of her actually goes with my Justice League because I do have the head from the first release, the hands from the first release, but the legs from the Shazam version, which make a pretty nice looking Wonder Woman live action figure. Now, when you talk about her height, I do want to remind everybody that if you're really wanting like a comic version and you're thinking that she's actually supposed to be like uh, Gal Gadot's size, actually in the comics, not a majority of the time, but there is certain comics where she is actually portrayed for what she is, which is actually an Amazonian. Of course, those are some really tall women. And I think that that Darwin Cook version of Wonder Woman actually shows her to actually be taller than Superman, which is pretty crazy. Now, I don't necessarily think she has to be that tall, but you are kind of construing yourself a little bit when you say that she's not supposed to be tall, she's supposed to be short, which in all actuality, she's not, unless you're talking about the live action versions of her. So it is kind of a big discrepancy of what we want from a Wonder Woman figure because when we saw the images, that is one of the first things that a lot of people were saying was that she looks like she has that long leg disease that sometimes McFarlane figures have. But I actually think they're going to be more matched up to like this Superwoman, one of my favorite figures from the Crime Syndicate wave. So I think her legs will basically be like these. And if you look at her, she actually does have a really nice symmetry because she has a muscular upper body, kind of thick, chest, a big round, derriere, and the legs actually match with that because they are some pretty thick, muscular legs. Now, I do think that whoever took this photo of the figure of the classic Wonder Woman kind of didn't really do her any justice with the way they bent her leg. Now, although we do know that nude flesh tone parts are not going to look exactly good with the pin technology that McFarlane still uses, you are not actually helping it out when you bend the knee at the top of the knee because when you do that, you actually get a pretty ugly cut where you can actually feel this like little pointy part here on the kneecap. And if you really want it to look good, you actually you can click it down a little bit on the upper knee, but you basically want to bend it more at the lower knee, and that would actually give you a nice line and silhouette where you don't have that big jarring kneecap sticking up. So it is true that it can look a little bit nicer, but basically this is the figure that we are getting, and you can, make it look a little bit better by knowing how to bend the articulation. Now, of course, these in a standing pose look perfect, but it is when you begin to bend the joints, when you start getting those unappealing, looking joints. So now I've always said that I'm not against pinless technology. The only thing I would say is that when you get into pinless, you start losing some customization abilities, and also you sometimes lose articulation because pinless joints are not really known for their full double joint range of motion. Sometimes, even though arms are double jointed and they're pinless, they only get 90 degrees of bend, which is not necessarily something that we want when we must sacrifice range of articulation to actually have a cleaner look. I will admit that. But for now, I'm actually fine with the way these figures are being executed. It's not a big deal to me. If you look at these two together, they're basically almost the same height. And the Superwoman actually looks awesome with a lot of different comic characters. So, one of my big rules is that I never finally give a final judgment on a figure until we actually have it in hand. And from the images, we can see that she does have some nice metallic paint on her armor. She has the classic, star spangled bikini briefs, and the face looks really attractive and the hair looks nicely sculpted, but we cannot get a definitive decision until we actually get the figure in hand. One thing we do know is that once this Wonder Woman figure is released, that just opens the gates to a lot of different alternate versions of Wonder Woman that we can actually get, repaints of this figure, or this same figure's basic body buck used with a more costume like the Justice League version. So actually, it opens a lot of opportunities to get more Wonder Woman figures, and hopefully, this opens up a little bit of the doors for more actual female figures. Now, once you go through the list of female figures, you're actually scraping the barrel pretty quickly because although I do agree that we need a Zatanna, we need a Black Canary, we need a Starfire. After that, it actually gets a little bit thin because I mean, spoiler, other other female characters like that, I don't really, aren't really my major priority. But what I would like to see is McFarlane actually be the first to make a punchline figure, which would actually be pretty awesome. So that's my thoughts on the Wonder Woman figure. Now, we also finally received images of Lobo with the Space Hog. Now, we have actually heard this figure rumored pretty much for a couple of years. Everybody knew it was coming. We just didn't know exactly, what it would look like in the end. But they did release some images, and actually, it is going to go up for pre-order on Amazon. Now, I do actually think that a lot of people like jump the gun right away and think that because it's on Amazon and it's Lobo, that like there's a big want for it, like the Batman movie pack or the Batman Batmobile gold label. I mean, all that stuff. That is because that attracts all collectors, from film collectors to Batman collectors to action figure collectors. While Lobo is a little bit less known than Batman. So let's not kid ourselves. I'm pretty sure everybody is going to be able to get this figure and the vehicle, which looks awesome. I can't understand how people can look at this and just look for something negative to say. Like, I think one of the things I heard was that, oh, it doesn't have a metal chain. It gives you that same reused accessory from the first release. And I could care less about that. What I really care about is the way the Space Hog looks. It has a beautiful metallic blue paint with all the cool little details that you usually see in the images of it from the comics. Now, we have actually received figures from Lobo before. Of course, we have the DC Universe Classics San Diego Comic Con exclusive Lobo, which I actually own. This is the one with the 3D glasses. Looks really good. Now, back in the day, I remember people complained that he was too big. He is about, I have to say, almost 9 inches, pretty much at least 8 inches. While, of course, we know DC Universe Classics was at the 6 inch scale. Now, the negatives about this guy is, of course, he has the same old articulation, single jointed elbows, single jointed knees, no uh, abdomen crunch to speak of. The hair really restricts the head movement. And although the sculpt is really nice and you got all the cool details that you would want from a Lobo, I actually love this figure. He's cool to have in the collection. Of course, we never received a vehicle for him. Now, he actually did come with Dog, and this is actually one of my favorite pieces that goes with Lobo. Really love the sculpt that they did on this bulldog figure. Looks really awesome. They have a little band-aid patch on him. Now, of course, Mattel never had a gun ban on them, so they were able to give him a blaster. He also has like this silver rifle that actually comes with Despero. Now, I have actually ordered an extra Despero weapon that I found on eBay, and I will be able to paint this up and put it with my new version of Lobo with the Space Hog, which, it's just some thinking ahead for me, to have some, more accessories because it is the same sort of space rifle that came with this Lobo. But all in all, really nice figure. I mean, I love having him in the collection, but of course, he goes with my complete DC Universe Classics collection. Now, Mattel actually had another shot at Lobo, but this time wasn't really too exciting. Mainly because they made him 6 inches, so he's pretty small. Now, maybe this pleased a lot of people that were complaining about the first release, so maybe this was to please them. Now, both of these do come with chain accessories for their hooks. Of course, that's all that this guy came with. He didn't really come with any accessories. And his articulation, once again, is limited. No crunch. Now, although I will give Mattel this, he is pinless, but he has no articulation at the elbows except for 90 degrees and even less than 90 degrees at the knees. So he is very limited in articulation. And no matter what anybody says, you can't deny the truth. These are some nice figures, but they are sporting some pretty dark ages articulation. And then we come to the one that McFarlane actually gave us. Now, I always thought this was a sleeper of a figure because you can actually still pick him up for pretty cheap. And that's just another clue that tells us that Lobo isn't as big a character as people think. He did not sell, necessarily very well, although everybody that got one, got one. So I am actually the only person I know that bought 5 of these Lobos. But if you take a look at this one, he is a very nice figure. Now, aside from all of the missing paint apps, which is basically what we come to expect from McFarlane, because of course this guy was $20, but this is my custom version where I repainted the face, added all the details, added the stars to the knee pads, some wash to the jeans. I mean, just look at him. I, did all the detail paint on him. But what you cannot take away is the articulation. He does have true double jointed elbows where you can actually bend them all the way back. Although they do have pins, it still looks really good. You have the double jointed knees, which is something that these two figures do not have. And they actually flex really nicely. Just an awesome, awesome figure. Now, I did add my own details. Like, it cost me about $1 to add this real chain to the hook that actually comes with the accessory. I added my own cigar, which you can either put it in between his fingers or you can actually put it in the crook of his mouth. And another thing I did add was a blaster because, of course, McFarlane having the mandate, he could not give him any sort of space weapon. And these actually, I have a couple of these. I think I have about maybe 12 of these left, and I just bought them randomly one time, like in a lot, and painting them up, and they do actually fit like sort of a space blaster. And it, since they are actually pretty big and they don't really fit in the hands of standard 7-inch figures, it actually fits perfectly in this larger Lobo's hand. So really happy with that. Of course, one of the biggest sellers of this figure was the back of the jacket, where he has that, bite me fanboy skull on there. Pretty awesome. So I just can't see how someone would think that this figure does not live up to the expectations or is inferior to this old, Mattel release. It just doesn't make sense to me, but to each their own. You could think what you want. You could have this one and be happy with it and say that that is your definitive Lobo. You could have this one and say that he's your Lobo when you want a more human sized Lobo. But for me, this is actually my definitive Lobo. Now, we do know that with the one that's coming, the dog that comes with it actually has a cool little sort of like pilot helmet or whatever, like old school pilot helmet. Looks really cool. So that's something that I look forward to. Is that although I do have a dog, I could have another version that looks just as cool. We also see that he comes with a guitar and two alternate heads. Now that brings me to where they were making fun of me because I actually bought multiples of this Lobo. I think somebody told me that I hope you know that the vehicle is actually coming with a Lobo figure, which actually makes sense because McFarlane does not need to spend any money on the figure, which is probably why he's giving us the extra dog and the extra alternate head, is because the figure was already made, which is something you should think about when people cry about McFarlane releasing a figure and it's just a simple release, because that means in the future we can get even more than what we expected. Now, I actually do have my my Lobo that this is an extra. I still have one in my unopened box collection. I still have my standard one that I have on the shelf, and I have this one. And now what I'm going to do is this body will actually be for the alternate head so that I could display both heads. So it wasn't a total loss. And of course, you know how it goes. He who laughs last laughs hardest. So I'm happy with having bought an extra Lobo figure. It's actually going to work out perfectly for me. Actually, one of the vehicles and figures that I'm more excited for is that Lobo figure. So you guys can decide for yourself, what you want to buy, but I am actually hyped for both of these releases. But you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.
And then we come to the one that McFarlane